Mike's Daily Podcast.
Episode 1435. I'm Mike Matthews, broadcasting from Café Anyway, located somewhere in Podcastro Valley, Mont. Back in Podcastro Valley, Mont. I was in Podcastro Valley 10 yesterday, but today we're here in Mont. What does that mean? I don't know. I think I can tell you that
Mike's Daily Podcast.
You can read between the lines. And then it's the last place on earth where we are.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
That's what we called the show years ago. And here we are. So we'll get to Bison Bentley, Valentino, Madame Rootabega. And did you know that the Labor Day weekend is over with? And I'm so freaking thankful for that. It was way too hot. Way too hot. Way too hot, my friend. And I hate frats. HBO should be
Mike's Daily Podcast.
FBO. Stand for Frat Boy Oi! Is what that should be. What?
Mike's
And that's
Daily
basically all
Podcast.
Oh, I have a question for you.
Yeah!
So North Korea does these atom bomb tests, I assume underground. Aren't they getting all that radiation? Isn't that coming up to the surface? Isn't that gonna, give them cancer and stuff? I mean, just logistically. Oh, there's a story about them moving their missiles to the coast of North Korea. We'll get to that. I'm really getting sick. Oh, look who walked in. I'm sick of hearing about North Korea, aren't you? We're not doing anything about them anyway, so why should we even care what they're doing? It's apparently we're just ignoring them, so why don't we just ignore them in the news? But Mike, we can't do anything because our allies are all around them. Isn't that the weirdest argument? Look who else walked in. That our allies are all around them, and so we have to be careful. I mean, if all our allies were surrounding our enemy, wouldn't that mean all our allies could just go over and kick that enemy's butt all at once? Isn't that how it was back on the school ground? When the bully was surrounded by everybody that hated him, they'd kick his butt. Put him in the hospital. I went to a rough school, my friend. Van Nuys First Baptist, that was a tough, rough and tumble little place. Oh, man. Look who, a bunch of people walked in. Hello, make a message, Madame Rootabega.
And here's today's podcast picture.
That's a nice picture. Thank you, madam. Yes, it is of the sunset last night. We have some high humidity happening right now in the Bay Area. And it's getting me all prepared for Florida in a couple weeks. And of course, got Hurricane Irma. Everyone's talking about that. Here's the thing with Hurricane Irma, if you're going to talk about it, don't even show me a beautiful woman, female anchor talking about it. I know as distracting as that can be, Greta Bronner, for example, from C-SPAN, I would much rather just see the frickin' path. Where is it gonna hit? They're not showing that ever. You have to go into images on Google or Bing and type in Hurricane Irma to even see where it's going. Because everybody, they don't even show you. But Mike, they don't even know yet. Yeah, they do. They got a good idea. They said, and I heard somebody say, oh, it's the Atlantic side. What part of the Atlantic? How far? The whole Atlantic side of the U.S.? What? East Coast? I want to know because I'm going to be flying there in 2 weeks. Is there going to be anything left when I get there? Or am I flying into a hurricane? Love all these questions. Life is full of questions, aren't they? Isn't it? N'est-ce pas? Look who else is here.
Hello there, Mike. This is Valentino, the parking attendant.
And this is Bison Bentley. Do you know that?
Mike, why did you book tickets for Florida if you knew there was gonna be a hurricane's day?
Yeah, why? Do you know that? Because late September usually means, and I'm going in the latter half of September, it's not quite the end of hurricane season, but hurricane season ends in October. I guess I should have just gone in October, but my mom was like, no, you can't go in October. It's Biketober in October. And Biketober means motorcycles everywhere and you can't move and you can't breathe, and there you go. Well, I already live in California where you can't breathe right now because of all the smoke. Although it's much nicer, and you can see in the podcast picture the nice sunset. And Basil the Boxer is in that picture as well. So Stormy Phoenix was on the last podcast, and she said to me, not on the podcast, but afterwards, she said, you know, there's this girl we work with who's around my age, who also has a boxer, who, she goes, you know, she's going to Florida just like you are. I don't know, Mike, kind of giving me that wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You two are meant for each other. Yeah, okay. That's great. Do you like the setup thing? Do people ever try and set you up? Look, I'm the last guy on the planet that anyone wants to set up with anyone. They'll go, Mike, he's a nice guy. Mike, you're a nice guy. You should be able to... No. I think people are busy with their lives and they got stuff to do. So I'm not going to impose. But these questions and more we should ask in our lives is if we're... You know, married people have always... There's usually a great meet story of how they met and how they, you know, won each other over, etc. And I guess my marriage failed because I didn't really have one of those. Friends, I have so much wisdom that I gleaned from the marriage, but I guess we did have kind of a interesting meet story. We met at a coffee house and I was performing there a couple of my songs and she was there, and it's kind of a cute story. And then when I proposed to her, we went to the coffee place and I sang her a bunch of songs I had written her. So I guess there was some cute stuff involved with our meet story, but that's neither here nor there. Over there, what's that up there? We have really got to get a broom and get that off of Café Anyway. And we forgot to say Café Anyway.
Anyway.
There we go. All right. Mike'sDailyPodcast.com is a wonderful website that you can go to and see past podcast pictures and listen to past shows, and you can help out the show through the Amazon link. Click on that and buy whatever it is you're going to buy, and that helps us out, makes us happy. You can answer questions. Email me there. There's an email address. There's the phone number too, 336-MM-DAILY. Let me know what you think about the stuff we talk about on the show. We'd love to hear from you. We get to your comments and your emails on the segment emails from email and your comment, not so comments. There's also the PayPal if you'd like to help us out that way. You'll get a special greeting from all the Café Anyway characters. Okay, let's get to this segment called
Mike rips someone a new one.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
So I already got to some of my ripping someone a new one. The news, primarily, is someone I'd like to rip a new one because I am getting sick of hearing about North Korea. I'd like to rip Kim Jong-un a new one for all this crazy aggression he has and messing up my world with his insanity. And I'm mad at the news for covering Hurricane Irma and not showing me what the frick is happening. But back to and on the media, a fantastic show comes out of WNYC, which I once stayed in a hotel right across the street from them. WNYC has this story, has this podcast. Actually, it's a show that's been on for about 20 years now on the media. I remember one of their early shows talked about how sitcoms, that the audience that you hear laughing on a sitcom, remember back when you were watching Happy Days or MASH or Cheers, the audience has changed over the years. And back then they were talking about how Friends, the audience, was so much louder with their laughter and so much more unruly. And that 70s show was probably the peak where the audience was just wild crazy, like woo, and doing all that, you know, because we had the hot Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, who are now married. And Walmer Valderrama and all those other, and Laura Prepon on the Orange is the New Black show now. But yes, so they had that. They were discussing that, and I always found it a great show. And now I'm gonna start listening to the podcast, because last night I was listening as I was taking my nightly shower, because I can't shower in the morning because I got to be up at 4 o'clock in the what the hell early morning. And the show on the media was talking about how we have been discussing Hurricane Harvey and the aftermath, and how we get so many things wrong with the media. Oh, when they say that's the biggest storm in 100 years, gives you the impression that, we won't have another big storm like that for another 100 years. Whereas the storms of the intensity of Harvey are getting more and more prevalent. And then there's all kinds of other things that the media is getting wrong when we do the Hurricane Harvey stories. One of them, I couldn't believe this guy said this. One of the media analysts, a professor somewhere, I forget, but he was talking about how we have these first responders, and we always rally behind the heroic antics of these first responders that go out there, and they're like on the choppiest seas, the craziest seas, saving people. And this guy pointed out, he goes, maybe some of these first responders are similar to the, he drew a comparison to the firemen that went up into the trade towers after the 9/11, after the planes had flown into those buildings. The consensus was pretty much that even you can't put that fire out. It's burning too hot. Why are you sending men in there? Why are you sending women, men in there, fire people in there? That's like suicide. And so that he was just saying we need to be thinking more about our people that are heroes that go in to save other people, but are we sending them into situations that are far too dangerous for them that they can't do any good? I guess was the point he made, which is not a very popular point to make, but that's what on the media is all about. So cool show. But back to South Korea. They said today an agreement with the United States to scrap a weight limit on its warheads would help it respond to North Korea's nuclear and missile threat after it conducted its 6th and largest nuclear test 2 days ago. South Korean officials believe more weapons tests by the reclusive state are possible, despite international outrage over Sunday's nuclear test and calls for more sanctions against it. South Korea's Asia Business Daily, citing an unidentified source, reported that North Korea had been observed moving a rocket that appeared to be an intercontinental ballistic missile towards its west coast. The rocket started moving yesterday and was spotted moving only at night to avoid surveillance. South Korea's defense ministry, which warned yesterday that North Korea was ready to launch an ICBM at any time, said it was not able to confirm the report. Analysts and South Korean policymakers believe North Korea may test another weapon on or around September 9th, when it celebrates its founding day. North Korea's 5th nuclear test fell on that date last year, reflecting its tendency to conduct weapons tests on significant dates. Okay, then back to Hurricane Irma. Let's see. It strengthened into a Category 5 storm today as it roared towards the northeast Caribbean on a path toward the U.S. The U.S. National Hurricane Center said Irma had sustained winds up to 175 miles per hour, and it was east of Antigua, about 270 miles. It was moving west at 14 miles per hour. Irma's center was expected to move near or over the northern Leeward Islands late today and early Wednesday. The eye was later expected to pass about 50 miles from Puerto Rico late Wednesday. Authorities warned that the storm could dump up to 10 inches of rain and cause landslides and flash floods and generate waves up to 23 feet. Residents on the U.S. East Coast were urged to monitor the storm's progress in case it should turn northward toward Florida, Georgia, or the Carolinas. And let's see. Meanwhile, in Florida, residents took advantage of the Labor Day holiday Monday to empty many store shelves of drinking water and other supplies in advance of the storm, which could affect the state by the weekend. Also yesterday, Florida Governor Rick Scott declared a state of emergency for the state's 67 counties to give local governments, quote, ample time, resources, and flexibility to prepare. Now, as we wrap up the show just about, I think we should go outside. You got a little tense in there. In the Café Anyway. People, what are they looking up how to the most on Google? By the way, Google has a weird Google Doodle today. It's a guy singing. Some Russian baritone guy. I could tell you all about it, but you should look it up yourself. You'll laugh at the animation. Here we go. The need to fix windows, walls, and doors topped lists everywhere. So the team threw out those results to focus on regional patterns. The result? North Americans and East Asians need their toilets. People in former Soviet countries are fearless enough to attempt fixing their own washing machines, and warmer climates can't live without a fridge. Other top searches revolve around cooking, dating, money, dressing, and health. Many folks want to know how to boil an egg, impress a girl, write a check, tie a bow tie, pick a lock, lose weight, gain weight, and get rid of pimples. Other items like cooking asparagus, asking someone to the prom, losing weight tend to be seasonal, says Google. Others are viral, peaking and declining over short periods, with subjects like how to make slime and loom bands. The data was culled from searches by users on how to do and fix things. One of the most common terms used on Google. The site itself was created by Google's News Lab. Next show, as we wrap up the show, it's going to be Chely Shoehart, Floyd the Floorman, and John Deere the engineer. I'm going to be positive in my life, as I've said before on this show, but with all the questions, all we can do is go, thank goodness for questions. They make life interesting, right? Right? Okay, kind of.
Mike's Daily Podcast is written and produced and performed by Mike Matthews. His podcast is super easy to find. Download or listen to his show and read his blog at mikesdailypodcast.com. Email Mike now at mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com. See you tomorrow. Bye!